Jim Karahalios back on the narrative this week because of some things that have been happening in Ontario politics. This usually isn't an issues show, of course, where we talk about a little piece of breaking news, but I thought this one had had some legs to it in terms of explaining some of the dynamics that happen in Canadian politics. So maybe, Jim, do you want to introduce us to what's going on and what the issue is with the Worldwide Freedom Rally in Queen's Park?
Well, I don't know if there's much of an issue from our perspective, but some of our New Blue supporters have been reaching out saying, why aren't you guys on the flyer at the rally at Queen's Park on Saturday? They've been promoting this flyer. And so we had to, Belinda felt like she needed to put out an answer for people, and she did that today in an email. We are going to support the truckers on Sunday in Fort Erie, though. That's where they're going to start on a convoy to Ottawa. It's a very important issue on the truckers and mandatory vaccines. You guys still there? Am I alone?
We're here, but you're lagging a little bit on our end.
Lagging, eh?
Yeah, but there's a little bit of lag, but yeah.
So for Saturday, though, they were promoting this flyer at this. I don't even know who these people are. These mysterious people behind this rally at Queen's Park. And there's one MPP in Ontario, one member of provincial parliament, who stood up from the PC side and voted against Doug Ford's lockdown bill. And there's one MPP that's been leading the charge in Queen's Park from the very first time, and that's Belinda Karahalios. We know Roman's been speaking out from kind of a different perspective. Speak. They didn't invite her to speak at Queen's Park. They didn't invite Belinda to speak. So did that come through, guys, or is it lagging?
I think there's a little touch of lag there, but yeah, I think everyone understood that like Belinda was the sort of only one who sort of stood up on those key issues, and for some reason she's not invited to speak, or you're not even invited to speak at the Worldwide Freedom Rally in like Toronto at Queen's Park. And the thing is, I find what people think is very odd here is that people reach out and say, well, why isn't Jim or why isn't Belinda showing up and speaking here? Don't they support freedom or something like that? And I find a lot of these rally type things that have been starting up, they've almost become sorts of like litmus tests. Well, if you show up to the rally, then you're a good person, where people will, or you're like standing up for freedom in a real way, where people criticize, and rightfully so, criticize Conservative Party of Canada MPs for never showing up to these things, never even supporting their message. But what they're doing to you now is it's almost like the Worldwide Freedom Rally in Toronto is specifically and deliberately not allowing either you or Belinda to speak, which makes it look like, well, all the people on stage, all those speakers, they're the real freedom fighters and no one else who happened to not show up. But yeah, and it would have been a bit more honest if they would have said that we chose not to allow the Karahalioses onto the stage.
Well, honesty is not in high order with the kind of characters they got on stage at the Queen's Park thing on Saturday, whether it's Randy Hillier or Derek Sloan. Honesty is not top of the menu with those two guys. So look, why it said it's happening now. It's not happening now. It's been happening for 2 years. Why? What do they say? The original on it, the OG, is that what they call it? When you're the OG?
Yeah.
On a file?
Yeah.
So look, Belinda is the OG on voting against lockdowns and mandates, not in Ontario, in Canada. There's not another Canadian politician who lost their spot in government or lost their spot in a political party for voting against lockdown or mandate-related legislation. Not another. The other guys in Ontario, they voted for it or they skipped the vote, okay? They didn't vote against Bill 12 on mandatory vaccinations in healthcare and education. Randy and the other politicians. Derek was quiet after that federal leadership. He was too busy congratulating Erin O'Toole for those few months to talk about anything related to COVID. And then he got kicked. And Belinda's the OG on this file. That's what the kids Wyatt's age say. She's the OG. And you know what? We're both the OG when it comes to fighting the establishment. Long before there was a PPC or a Max Bernier, there was axe the carbon tax, because the Conservatives were soft on it in that leadership. And before Patrick Brown, no one was saying anything about Patrick Brown, carbon tax, screaming Islamophobia, every right, left, and center, vote rigging in his internal party races. And we fought against it. The original Mavericks is what we'll say. And we get a lot of copycats coming up. And it's always good to have more voices. That's fine. But when you have a rally and the one MPP that voted against it doesn't get invited, but they invite the MPP, Randy, who hasn't been to Queen's Park in a year. He's now showing up to speak on the front steps. And they're inviting a couple of former federal politicians. Like, what kind of, is that a real protest or is this theater? Like,
well, I guess it worked out for Randy because he didn't actually have to step inside of Queen's Park if you showed up. But I was just going to ask you if you maybe want to address Bob Brown's question of explaining why exactly these sorts of people don't actually want to join the New Blue Party, or why at very least they're refusing to even say what they want to do until they start their own vehicles.
Read it.
What Bob Brown wrote is, explain why neither Hillier, Sloan, Babber, nor Nichols will join the New Blue Party.
Oh, that's a good question, Bob. So in October, Belinda was talking to Rick Nichols. This is really important. And she said it in her email today. Rick gave Belinda advice in a moment of honesty. Rick said to Belinda, because he's been in there for 10 years, right? And he knows all of it. And he said, you guys at the New Blue should not try to recruit any current or former PC MPPs. Don't do it, because none of us are going to want to go into the June 2nd election fighting against our friends on the PC benches. So guys, there's a real big difference between not liking Doug Ford and being upset because you got kicked out, like Rick, because he didn't want to take the vaccine, but he was saying Doug Ford was an A- job on the lockdowns just a year ago. He said, A-, great work. Doug's doing great work. But when it affected him, he got kicked out. There's a difference. Ontario PC Party, which is what we want to do. We've been very clear. We want to replace the Ontario PC Party. These other guys don't want to do that. They want to maybe have a leadership race because they have these fantasies that they're going to be the leaders of the Ontario PCs, which is just total fantasy land, because the guys running these leaderships kick people out of the race if you're in third. If you finish in last, they'll let you run, but not if you're going to catch up and pass someone. They're not. So they might want to have another leadership race so they can bring in a Stephen Lecce or someone more progressive than Doug and who's going to lock down even further. But they don't want to replace the Ontario PC Party. And that's why in their communications, and that's why on Saturday when you look, they're not going to mention Doug Ford very much. They're not going to talk about the Ontario PC government very much. They're going to say generally the government, this monolithic thing called the government. And they're going to say things like, it was Justin Trudeau government much. Now, maybe because they're listening to this, they might, just to prove me wrong. But so far, for a year and a half, 2 years, when you go to those rallies, everyone pretends like they don't know who the premier and the government is in Ontario. And that's because they're not actually trying to replace the Ontario PC Party.
Oh,
and we are.
Jim,
and they're not comfortable with it. So I'm going to cut off, Wyatt.
Oh, sorry. Just letting you know, there's someone in the chat saying that they are noticing the buffering. So maybe on your end, if you want to see if you can, if there's any sort of tabs in the background, they're sort of slowing down your speed somehow for your computer and adding in these momentary hair thin lags. But sorry to go on your
come back in, guys.
What?
You're sounding good, but the only thing is, if you're doing this by Wi-Fi, there could be a lag. If you're doing this by a cable, you're fine, like Ethernet.
Okay, you guys keep going. I'm going to check that out.
Okay,
fair enough.
All right. Yeah, here's my big concern. And you know me, I'm a conservative. All right. But the problem with the Ontario Conservative Party, and here now I can talk as an Ontario Conservative, the problem that I find with the Ontario PC Party is, really, are there really any conservatives in the Ontario PC Party? Because what Jim was talking about really reminded me of a long ongoing problem, not only the tax problem, but look at it. We had before John Tory as the leader of the Ontario PC Party. Now he's the mayor of the city of Toronto. And my God, he is no different than Justin Trudeau. There is no daylight between those two. He's gone all woke, progressive, and lockdown crazy. Then you had after that Patrick Brown, who really should be a liberal because he's super progressive and insane on so many different levels. He was unceremoniously kicked out. We all remember when he was running down the stairs like a little child, being kicked out of the party. And then all of a sudden you have Doug Ford, and Doug Ford comes in like a tough guy, which is at the beginning, which we all thought was great, but nobody voted for Doug Ford except for a few people in Scarborough and Etobicoke. People voted anti-Kathleen Wynne, and Doug Ford never realized that. Now, Doug Ford was okay at the beginning, in my opinion, perhaps, but the pandemic came, and he's basically locking down Ontario worse than California, worse than New York, worse than many other jurisdictions, except perhaps maybe Quebec. So what's going on with the Ontario PC Party? Why is the Ontario PC Party basically Liberal light for the last three leaders?
And the thing is, I like, a lot of people will say, well, there's still conservatives in all these parties, in the Ontario PCs and the federal Conservative Party. But the problem is that there's a difference between being an actual conservative on the inside and being an effective conservative. Like, effectively, are you conservative or are you not? Or are you just saying whatever Aaron O'Toole wants you to say? The problem is that if you're not actually being conservative in an active manner, you essentially aren't doing anything, which is the problem with people like Rick Nichols. Is nice guy. He probably has some personally conservative beliefs, but they never really come out until he's suddenly kicked out of caucus over the vaccine issue. And then he'll sort of kind of talk about some more conservative talking points after he can't actually effectively do anything or effectively advocate for anything. And I thought was really funny, and this was back when both I and then Greg Stately at the Diverge Media wrote articles about Randy Hillier, just because I was sort of interested. So I was combing through his Twitter account before he blocked me, of course, where I was finding with Randy Hillier. And if you look through his page, or if you look through the Ontario First Party's page on Twitter, they would be constantly criticizing other international jurisdictions. They'd be criticizing Germany. They were criticizing the Maritimes. They were criticizing Joe Biden. And then it's like, maybe you have them say that, well, it's a little unreasonable what Doug Ford's doing, and they probably don't even name him. There is a sort of weird lack of actual criticism of the establishment party. And if they wanted to prove any of us wrong that have been noticing this problem, well, then they can just criticize them consistently and we would leave them alone. I wouldn't ask questions about it anymore. But if you're acting like the most conservative guy in the room and the guy who's going to stop the lockdowns like Randy Hillier is, well, then you actually have to be taking shots at Doug Ford. How can you beat someone that you're not willing to strike?
Yeah, and the other thing you guys are missing, though, is these guys are being handled by PC operatives.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a lot at stake here. Randy Hillier has a deal with the guys in the back. They changed election laws. We did a whole show on it.
Mm-hmm.
He's not joining the New Blue Party that says we want to take out and replace the Ontario PC Party. He's not doing it. He announced some party called Ontario Last. Everyone got mad that I called it Ontario Last. They didn't even get off the starting line. Last place would have been good in that scenario. They didn't.
It's not even registered.
It's over for that party. So this is just a bunch of distractions, right? And they're being handled in the back by PC operatives, and they might not like Doug Ford. They might want a new leadership race because there's a lot of money that goes into those leadership races. And these operatives make a lot of money. But you know what they don't want? They don't want the New Blue Party to replace the Ontario PC Party. And the lobbyists in the back, I mean, you got to ask the question, not only why these guys weren't speaking against lockdowns and mandates before Belinda got kicked out and before we announced the New Blue Party. We've covered that. But for crying out loud, vote rigging in the Ontario PC Party nominations, no one said a thing. Carbon tax, no one said a thing. Islamophobia, no one said a thing. The list goes on and on. For a decade, these guys had no problems.
Well,
they had no issues with the Ontario PC Party.
I keep hearing from people in the background, well, like Jim Karahalios is correct on the vote rigging. Jim Karahalios is right on this. And they'll just list a bunch of areas where they think you're correct. And then I'll always ask them, because I've been confused. So I've just been calling up like dozens of people about this saying, hey, why is this going on? And the answer I always get for why everything's just artificially fracturing is, well, people don't get along with Jim. And it's like, well, all I hear is complaints from one side, and I don't hear actual complaints from Jim and like against any of these people until they start complaining against him. It's sort of
but it's correct. But it's correct. They don't like me, and that answers the whole question, right? Like, they don't really care about the mandates and the lockdowns that much because their personal dislike of me takes precedence over fighting lockdowns and mandates and the betterment of society. That's the answer right there.
So Jim,
why don't
the reason they don't like you is because you're rocking the boat for them? Is that why?
Because we've rigged elections, lobbyists controlling the party and the party. The left-wing course of the Ontario PC party for 6 years. They sued me, and not one of these guys that you're talking about had an issue. No one said a thing when they sued me, and I won. They rigged an election against me at a convention in 2018, and not a single person, guys that you're talking about, plus other advocates, they didn't say a thing about the rigged vote. And when Belinda got kicked out, none of them said a thing. And forget about me and Belinda. Just talk about Ontario like they didn't say a thing when people were going bankrupt with their businesses from March till October. I had a woman out in East York last week call the party line, Richard. Can you hear me? Because this is important and I'm going to lag. Okay. Computer, because I'm getting annoyed with the lagging. This woman called our party line crying. And I called her back right away. And her mom was in the hospital, I believe with COVID and pneumonia. Okay. I didn't get it all because she was crying on the phone. She was desperate to ask me because she heard me say on social media that I took monoclonal antibody treatment. And she wanted to know why the doctor at the hospital wasn't giving it to her mom. And I said to her, from what I understand, because I'm not a doctor, but go ask them, it's too late. Your mom is intubated and she can't get the treatment. Okay. And we've been pushing out there why the Ford government's not expanding early treatment. People are getting side effects from the vaccines, and people are dying from COVID, vaccinated or not. And these guys are sitting around going, I don't like Jim Karahalios. What's wrong with these guys? Is there something wrong in their heads? People are sick. We've got businesses going bankrupt. They don't care about these people. They've never cared about these people. They only care about what the operatives in the back have to offer them. Okay?
Well, and I think it's plainly obvious, too, that they're not exactly trying very hard to actually unseat Doug Ford and the PC party as the true conservative party in the province. None of them have either parties registered, or if they do have a party registered, none of them have almost any EDAs, and some of them aren't even planning on running themselves or even running a candidate in every single riding. And then you have to wonder why we're supposed to think that any of these things have legs to them, or they can gain any sort of momentum when they're essentially going to serve maybe a third of the entire province or just half the entire province, and they expect that they're going to get donations and sort of like rocket to the top of the polls. They literally have no ability to win. They're not. Just sort of, like either they're paper parties or they're set up to collect a bunch of momentum and then fall apart.
Yeah. We got this trucker mandate now, COVID vaccine mandates on the truckers. Belinda and I are going to Fort Erie. We've been invited to speak. Grateful. We're going on Sunday morning. It's a huge issue, and it started from Ontario because the Doug Ford conservatives, progressives, they're not conservatives, were pushing for mandates, and they were lying about it. But they were telling employers in private sector, healthcare, education, to go for mandatory vaccines, which just paved the way for Justin Trudeau to do it federally, right? So look at the approach. Rick Nichols, to talk about this issue because it's an issue in his riding, he wrote a letter. He wrote a letter to Doug. And he said in the letter, Dear Doug, please pick up the phone and call Justin. And get Justin to reverse course on this mandate. It was so polite, Richard. It was such a nice letter. It was so mad at me. I'm just going to write this letter, and I'm going to ask you, is that leadership? Is that challenging the government on an issue? Is that standing up at Queen's Park like Belinda's doing all on her own and challenging the government and saying, why are you taking this position on mandatory vaccines and healthcare education? She wrote a letter to Monty the other day, the Minister of Labor, saying, I demand that you rehire the people that got fired in healthcare because of your actions, the government's actions, and now we have a shortage of staff in healthcare, and stop trying to fill the vacancies with international workers before you put Ontarians back to work. I demand There's no, dear Monty, would you call Justin? So they focus on the liberals. They give a pass to the PCs because they don't want to replace the PCs. And this is deep rooted, and the operatives in the back behind these guys. And we reached out. Like, the other thing is, would see the light and put away their relationships with the operatives. And we reached out to every single one of them. The last one was Derek Sloan. But at the end of the day, Rick Nichols was absolutely right when he said to Belinda, you guys should not bother wasting your time recruiting former or current PC MPPs because they're not going to fight against their friends in the PC party. We are taking on the government of the largest economy of a G7 country, okay? They have a lot of reach and a lot of people spread out all over the province saying whatever people want to hear in their ears to keep people away from the New Blue because we got momentum. And it's not making a difference, guys. It's not making a difference because we had our first candidate application deadline the other day, and we thought we were going to get enough candidates to fill some of the ridings, and we got, like, it's almost a couple hundred that we got. I haven't checked since yesterday before the deadline hit, and we're going to start that candidate selection process. Thousands of members and donors. We're doing really, really well. We're already getting recognized in the polls. One poll had other party at 8%.
Did you see that poll that it seemed like Roman Baber commissioned, where it listed a new party by Roman Baber, the Ontario First Party led by Randy Hillier, and then it listed the rest of the mainstream options and then didn't list you? I find that sort of suspicious, where it's sort of like they're trying to pretend like they're the other category in all these other polls. But again, without infrastructure, without people actually door knocking and leafleting, I really doubt any of these essentially social media parties can do anything. Not that they're even meant to do anything, but if, as an average person, I guarantee you, the person who shops at Safeway, buys their coffee at Starbucks, does not know who Roman Baber even is, probably, and they don't know what the Ontario First Party is. And if you explain it to them, they'll probably not decide not to vote for it. Whereas, from what I've at least seen on the ground, talk to people who support New Blue, they tend to support New Blue because you guys have actually showed up to their door and they know you from the community, and there seems to be a more of like this is an actual party that has substance in my riding. I can sort of, actually go out and touch it in some way. Whereas a lot of these other parties, it's sort of social media followers from these sort of like characters, these political characters who may or may not even live in Ontario, but they're hyping it up because that's their guy. And I think that's kind of toxic politics at the end of the day.
Well, there's a difference between having a social media profile and having a political party, right? Political party takes a lot. You got to have your board, you have your constitution together, you got to get your processes in place, you got to take candidate applications, you got to get everything settled with Elections Ontario in terms of the reporting.
You got to get registered.
You got to get registered, which it doesn't look like it's happening for the Ontario lab. It was over. We all got to the starting line. I said, you guys are going to finish last. They said, we're not running. We're not running. It's over. And I'm going to tell, we can't end the show before I tell you what's going to happen next, because I know what these guys are going to do, because I know what's coming. But you got to get registered. There's a lot of work, right? You got to put the platform out there, and we're working on the platform. It's going to be amazing. And we had an all-party meeting yesterday with all of our riding leads on virtually, and it was amazing. Everyone was pumped up. Everyone was excited. Everyone just says, keep going. Forget these distractions. And they're right. Sometimes I take too much time talking about these distractions because I don't like the deception. It bothers me when these guys are deceiving people into giving them money. It bothers me because they're not actually fighting. And I get a call from a woman whose mom passes away because Doug Ford is not expanding early treatment on COVID across Ontario. And it bothers me, right? And these guys don't want to talk about that and tell people they're building political parties. So Derek Sloan, Rick Nichols, they won't confirm they're running in the next election. And if you're February, which we are in a week, and you haven't committed to running in the next election, then you're not serious. Mm-hmm. And Derek Sloan's told people he's not running candidates in every riding, and he's said in an email, he's not. He's got some arrangement with the Stop the Sex Ed Party, which is an operation of the PC operatives. And it was said that if the Stop the Sex Ed Party runs 5 people in Toronto, Derek Sloan's not going to run anyone there, and he's not going to run candidates in every riding. So these are games that are being played. And when it comes to June 2nd, this is what's going to happen. There's going to be the 4 establishment parties, and we're trying really, really hard to have a candidate in every riding under the banner of New Blue. And when the voter goes to vote on that day, they're not going to care about Jim Karahalios, Belinda Karahalios, Derek Sloan, Randy Hillier, Roman Baber, Rick Nichols, Doug Ford. All they're going to see is the plan in place and the options. And the option to replace the establishment parties is going to be New Blue, and they're going to have to make that choice. And in the meantime, these are all hiccups and bumps in the road that I got to deal with. But I don't understand, Richard, you know my history. And I think, haven't I made it clear, like Jim doesn't back down? Jim doesn't, and like, why do they keep messing with me, man? Why do they keep copying my stuff and destroying it? And they keep coming after me, but I guess they got to have something to do, right, Richard?
What do you say, Wyatt?
Well, I don't know. I don't think they probably even know you, but at this point, but they'll soon probably know you if this gets dragged out any longer. But I was just going to wonder, I was just wondering, like maybe probably a lot of other people are, is there any chance that you as sort of the leader of the New Blue Party would be able to actually be on the debate stage come the election, like later this spring or summer?
Whatever debate commission they have in place and what the debate rules are going to be. I'm sure they're going to say you have to have a candidate in every riding, and we're working really hard to do that. We've got applications from every region. We need some more help in the north, and we're going to carve out a separate northern strategy. But Wyatt, I don't even know, like, I don't think Doug Ford is going to want me on the stage because Aaron O'Toole didn't want me to debate him. And Doug Ford doesn't want me to debate him, and his handpicked party president that won the presidency of the PC party from a rigged vote, he didn't want me to debate him. And Randy Hillier doesn't want me to debate him because he didn't want a leadership race. And Derek Sloan doesn't want me to debate him because he doesn't want a leadership race. And Roman Baber doesn't want a leadership race. So I don't know if they're going to put me on the stage. And frankly, I don't think it really matters because what we need is candidates in every riding. And we're going to do a grassroots campaign. And we got to Rob Ford ran for city council the first time in 1997 and lost. I looked it up to remind myself because everyone remembers Rob Ford as the original Ford, as Wyatt's generation would say, the OG of Ford. Okay?
He's loving that term.
Yeah. I thought for Wyatt we'd say it, right?
I think I'm actually still too young for. I think I'm too young for that even.
Oh man, you see, I can't keep up with like the new generation. But look, Rob ran for the first time in '97, and he didn't become a household name until after that mayoral race. Was that 2010, I think, when he won?
Okay.
Anyway, it was well over a decade, right, later. And so when you're going up against a couple of brands like the PC brand, the Liberal brand, there's no shortcuts. There's no viral meme that's going to go out. There's no viral, name overnight. And you see all the things that we've gone through in politics over the last 6 years, getting suing a party for kicking me out of a race, Belinda getting kicked out of a political party and kicked out of the legislature, a rigged convention against us, Belinda getting banned from the legislature for 90 days. And that's a lot of coverage in the media. And we're still not household names because you got to get through a campaign. We have to get 124 candidates, get through a campaign. And in the campaign, we're going to force people to pay attention. We're going to have a great platform, guys. There's going to be, we're going to cover lots of themes in the platform with specific commitments. And that's our objective. We got to make the New Blue Party on par with the top 3 establishment parties, replace the Ontario PC party, and create a party in Ontario that's sticking up for Ontarians, defending the taxpayer, not a party that's representing the interests at the top and the lobbyists, a party that's going to put the lobbyists in check.
But Jim, here's what the problem I see. I think the problem you're going to face is the mainstream corrupt media is not going to give you airtime for your party. And for the same reason that they probably don't want to have you on the debate stage against whether it's Ford or Del Duca or Horvath or whatever the case may be. Because I think for the media and for the establishment and for the deep state, whatever you want to call it, they don't care who really wins, because what's the difference between Doug Ford, the Liberals, or the NDP? It's really all the same. It's going to be lockdown central over and over and over again, as we've already seen with Doug Ford the last 2 years. So why would they give you any oxygen? Why would they put you on the debate stage to show something different? They're going to probably put those three on this debate stage, and they're going to argue about very inconsequential little things and get, turn the attention away from the audience from what really counts, which is, the lockdowns. Toronto had been locked down since November. It had been like a 6 or I forgot how many months they were locked down. Now the restaurants are closed again. The gyms are closed again. Doug Ford comes out yesterday saying, oh, I'm going to open up the gyms. I'm going to open up the restaurants. I'm going to increase the number of things. But he's still going to keep the QR code. He's still going to keep the vaccine passports. He's still going to keep the useless, unscientific masks, which are useless. It's for no good. And then you have other jurisdictions like like Florida, like Texas, like Tennessee, like Arizona, where they've been open up now for in Florida's case, for over a year, since October of 2020. And look, their numbers are so low. They're post-COVID.
You don't even have to be a strong conservative. The UK's doing it.
Look, Ireland too. Ireland just announced it.
Okay,
that's ridiculous.
Who cares about the media, Richard? You're putting so much emphasis on the media. Who cares?
Okay. So how can you get your message past over the hurdle of the media?
It's direct to voter, Richard. That's what campaigns are all about. You don't go through the media.
Okay.
How many times have me or Belinda been in a race and they said they got no chance? Oh, he's got no chance with Axe the carbon tax. Never going to succeed. And then when Doug Ford was running, all four candidates were clamoring at the chance to copy the messaging of Axe the carbon tax when it was a direct to voter campaign, when it was time for the election. The media ignored me for like 2 years of that campaign until the leadership hit and everyone was talking Axe the carbon tax, and they still largely ignore it with a couple of exceptions. So that wasn't going to work, they said. And then Belinda was going to run in Cambridge, and they said, oh, no, there's no way that Belinda can win a nomination. There's no way she can win the general election. And she got more votes than any other PC candidate in the region, Waterloo, Cambridge region. And they were covering Patterson, friendly to Ford. I had no chance. They had to rig it to stop me. And we went to the leadership. Like, the list goes on and on. Aaron O'Toole was getting all the media. Peter MacKay was getting all the media. I didn't get any media. It was all Lewis and Sloan and MacKay and O'Toole. And I was in third, hot on the heels of O'Toole, without any media. They had to kick me out of the race twice to stop me from winning. That was the core of the issue. And so the media is not going to cover us, but they're going to cover us when they have to, when we have candidates in every riding.
And this is sort of where I wanted to go back to sort of the point of the show, the narrative of talking about political strategy and optics and sort of the way people market themselves, is that when I look at something like the way the PPC ran in both 2019 and 2021, I see a losing strategy, where the thing is that when you jump in a race and you don't have that much media covering you, it seems quite silent, yet you're quickly catching up to Peter MacKay and Aaron O'Toole despite having announced after them. It seems as if there is a better strategy to building credibility and having a lot of soft support, a lot of people where they've supported you in the past, you've followed through, so they're going to follow you into the future. Whereas with Maxime Bernier and what Derek Sloan's doing now, it seems like because they have to create a lot of noise on social media to get any amount of momentum, and there's no organic momentum behind them. Because when you join them, when you join a PPC EDA, well, like a couple of years later, the whole thing gets deregistered because it's not being maintained, and you start to lose confidence, where they might have a lot of people on social media retweeting them, but the people who are key to actually getting the message out to door knocking and whatnot, those people are the ones who quickly melt away because they don't rely on the structure of the parties. They don't think that the actual people are credible and reliable when it actually comes down to real campaigning. They can get a lot of like noise in specific echo chambers, but going outside of that to talk to people who are not particularly political, they have no resources to do that.
You guys want me to jump in on that?
Go right ahead.
Yeah, sure thing.
So I don't really want to talk about the PPC because the PPC was saying, oh, Jim, we'd love for you to run for us, and we love the New Blue Informal Alliance. And in March of last year, so not quite 10 months ago, I was in a hospital bed for 2 weeks, and they took 80% of my femur out, and a full knee replacement, and replaced my femur with internal prosthesis, and I lost 2 of the 4 quad muscles because of the tumor in my leg. and I was in the hospital for 2 weeks. And when I got home, I think it was March, Max called me to run. And I'm like, Max, I'm in a wheelchair because I just had this major surgery, my second one. And I'm in the middle of a 6-round chemo. And he asked me to run. And they were telling us, oh, yeah, we support New Blue. We're in Informal Alliance. And you know what they were doing in March?
The suspense is
you got cut off there for a second. Sorry.
Did I get cut off? Why?
What were they doing in March?
In March, they went to Elections Ontario to try to register People's Party of Ontario.
Right.
No, sorry. They didn't go to Elections Ontario. They went to the guy in Toronto, Kevin Clark, who's run 12 times for mayor in Toronto, and tried to cut a deal with him to give him the People's Party of Ontario name. So I don't know how you can really trust the PPC with any commitments or even a campaign strategy when they can't even support a party in Ontario and back up their word in Informal Alliance. This is duplicitous behavior. They left me for dead, I guess, because I said I had a tumor in my leg. And now, I don't know why, Richard, these guys doubt me. They think, oh, he's got a tumor. He's major surgery. He's probably done. Let's go register a provincial party in Ontario. And that failed, and that didn't work. And I'm back. Like, I don't know. I think I fight back, Richard. I think I come back. That's the motto here. So Wyatt's right. You can't really trust anything those guys are selling. And the backstabbing is just so terrible in politics. Like, you know,
I find that concerning where people are saying that they're your friend to your face and they're saying that they're in an informal alliance. Yet when you look at the history of people trying to register names and trying to approach people to get the other names of political parties so they can register one that's very similar to it, well, like, how can you trust anyone when they seem to have like 3 contingency plans and they don't trust you? I think a lot of people sort of, again, get swayed by messages on social media by these people. And it's like, why wouldn't you put your best foot forward on social media? Actions matter at the end of the day. And that's why I actually like to, whenever people ask about, like, well, didn't Jim do this or that? Or why isn't he talking about vaccines more or something like that? I'm like, okay, who at the end of the day has the actual party that is that's actually organized, has EDAs, and people actually have a voice in it? These weird top-down social media parties don't do that, but they'll share links from certain popular social media people. So I guess they're edgy and cool or whatever.
Wyatt, that's the whole point. How can you trust the PPC? With all due respect to our audience who may be PPC federally, how can you trust a federal party that doesn't even have a constitution or a proper leadership race or anything else like that? How could you trust a party like that? So if I'm going to get a call from Maxime Bernier, I'm going to take it with a humongous grain of salt because, you know, as I've said before, the PPC is nothing more than a cult of personality. We're seeing the same thing with Derek Sloan. We're seeing the same thing with Randy Hillier.
Except those guys don't have parties, so at least Max has a political party.
To clarify, though, Jim, so when you're doing the candidate selection, if there is more than one candidate in a riding who wants, more than one person who wants to be the candidate in a riding, does it then turn into a competitive race for who's going to become the candidate, at least within the small membership of the EDA? Because I've noticed that federally with the PPC, I was hearing that whenever there was 2 or 3 people who wanted to do it, the sort of from top down, they just picked the one they wanted.
Yeah, of course. We're going to have the riding associations lead that and conduct a vote. And we're going through all the applications now, see who's willing. Am I lagging again, guys?
Yeah.
I'm good.
There must be something where something's open in the background or whatever.
I can reboot the computer if you want. And see.
We could always do that and bring you back in for the last 15 minutes or so.
Okay, let me do that, and we'll answer the question on the candidate selection process that's going to lead to votes and ridings.
Cool. Me and Richard can just sort of mill about a little bit and talk about what we think about what we sort of think.
I'd love you to put the comment up on the screen, which was a little bit earlier, and I think it was from, I forgot who posted. It was really good. Let me just pull it
Was it
up.
the Van Newen one, this one?
Oh, no, it was John Bell said, can't find one comment on Ford's page that is supporting anything Ford does. And it's absolutely true. It's higher up. It's about 17 minutes after we started. Yeah. And this is so true. If anybody goes to social media posts, particularly on Facebook, well, I guess on Twitter too, but I see it all the time on Facebook. Every time Doug Ford posts anything or the PC party posts anything, He's getting slayed in the comments. People are so angry at him.
And to be fair to Doug Ford for a second, but it's not going to make him look good. Of course, your opponents are going to be the first ones who are responding to everything because they're trying to dunk on you. They're trying to, make you look bad. But when it is a ghost town for Doug Ford's comment section, there's no one pushing back. If you do, that person's going to get made fun of, and it's probably a singular person of like 300 comments. Anything good that Doug Ford has done, it's been a Pyrrhic victory in the sense that it's a good little policy, but his extreme lockdowns destroy the policy anyway. So who cares? It's like Jason Kenney in Alberta here. Why do I care what Jason Kenney does? Like all the good deregulation he's done and sort of lowering taxes a little bit and trying to deal with the debt. I wish he would actually have been more aggressive with dealing with the debt during basically the year that he had before COVID. But he never did. But again, I was at least happy he was doing a little bit on it. But anything good he's done has been wiped out by the fact that I no longer trust him because he cannot learn from his mistakes on COVID. Every single government pretty much made mistakes at the start. It's a new situation. Everyone gets it. I'm not saying that you should be perfect, but the fact that other jurisdictions are learning the lesson, they're demonstrating the better way forward right in front of you, and you refuse to listen, that's when you are sort of disqualify yourself from leadership. And I'm not sure how anyone really rallies back behind Doug Ford or then says, well, I want Del Duca or Horvath because they would have taken it more seriously. Like all of Ford's policies failed. So I'm not sure how being more serious about it is going to mean anything. If the policy works 0%, doubling it is going to still work 0%.
Yeah, but back to John's comment and to what your comment is, what I'm saying is if you look at the social media comments or for Doug Ford, it's not like liberals or NDP people are slagging him. What it is people saying, I voted for you and I thought you were a conservative and you've done everything wrong. You've done, this wrong, that wrong. And they're really attacking him saying, we voted for you. We voted for a change. You haven't given us that. And the ones that are actually congratulating him are like the liberals saying, oh yeah, Doug Ford, we're so happy that you have these vaccine passports. We're so happy that you have QR codes. We're so happy that you're triple masking our children so that they're suffocating in schools. That's what's happening.
He doesn't understand his own.
It's not like liberals are attacking Doug Ford. It's conservatives who voted for him in 2018 that are attacking Doug Ford in the comments.
Right.
It seems like there's always a jealousy among conservatives who get into who become premiers or the leaders of the Conservative Party of Canada. Is that there are always these red Tories who are like jealous of the base that the NDP and the Liberals have. So they throw their own people under the bus, thinking that they're going to inherit these fashionable sort of like good time supporters. And it's like you're not going to do that. Why do you want people who fundamentally believe something different than you do? Supposedly, because I think a lot of these people believe what the Liberals believe. They just want to
all of them. A lot of these people, and it's not jealousy. The PCs resent their voters.
Yeah. Like, did anyone know that Michelle Rempel literally ran in Nose Hill? I think it's Nose Hill, or maybe it is Nose Hill. I'm just thinking Thornhill for a second. Before she ran to become the Conservative candidate for Nose Hill in Calgary, she ran in the Liberal nomination, lost, and then just swapped.
Really?
She just wanted to get in some. Yeah, no, that's true.
Well, in Ontario, I could tell you, like, being someone that was born to a dad who had a fish and chips restaurant, my mom was a hairdresser. The establishment in the PC party just resent people like that.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter. You go to school, you make the mistake of going to law school like I did, and it doesn't matter. They still view you as, lower crust. So it's not a surprise that Doug, and it doesn't matter who it is, who would be in charge of a Rod Phillips, Christine Elliott, Caroline Mulroney, Stephen Lecce. They want to get invited to the cocktail circuit, right? And they want to be, who's cutting the big checks? What companies are cutting the big checks? Big corporations will make the legislation or the regulations amenable to them. And we don't want to get criticized. They can't handle getting criticized by the Star, the Globe and Mail. They want to look like the beautiful people. And we've come across this too, right, in the New Blue Party. And what we're realizing is it's not even a right-left thing. It's a establishment and wannabe establishment folk. And then there's people that want to protect Ontarians in the grassroots. And if you're wannabe establishment, you don't really want to join the New Blue. You just kind of, is there another way we could do this where I can get back on the inside? It's kind of like what Rick Nichols said, when he got kicked out. Maybe if they have me back, I'll run for them again before the next election. If not, I'm retired. And then another interview asked him, what are you going to do after your career's over? Because I might be a government lobbyist. Like, dying government lobbyist. Imagine dying, criticizing Corey Tenayk for being a lobbyist, Doug Ford's campaign manager, but then he wants to be a government lobbyist. Like, they're dying to be on the inside, right? The upper crust.
Well, I noticed that especially.
Yeah, go ahead, Wyatt.
I noticed that especially with sort of social conservatives, is that there's a lot of social conservatives in these various parties around the country who it's almost like a deal with the party establishment that, okay, we will run a couple candidates on all the leadership races. We will push our ideas in the convention, but we'll make sure to almost win. We'll always just almost win. And every once in a while, you'll give us like a small victory that you'll then wipe out before the next election and convention. And that's what I never get, is why are people following
no one's explaining
or taking advice from lifelong losers? A lot of these people who Randy Hillier, Derek Sloan, Rick Nichols are sort of advising them in the background are people who just consistently lose. So why do they think it's going to work this time?
They lose on purpose, right? And so what you're going to see happen, let's talk about this, and then we can talk about what those guys are going to do to stop New Blue or try to stop New Blue before June, because I know the playbook. I know what the backroom negotiations are that's going on right now, what we're going to do to stop it, what New Blue is going to do to stop it. So Randy Hillier ran for leader in the PC party, and he finished last when Tim Hudak won. And the purpose of Randy Hillier being in that race was to support Tim Hudak and stop Frank Cleese from becoming leader. Frank Cleese was the pro-life option in that race. Mm-hmm. And that was Randy Hillier's job, to help Hudak, and they both ran against the Human Rights Commission, like getting rid of it. And when Hudak won, not Randy nor Hudak ever spoke of getting rid of the Human Rights Commission ever again. 15 years later, they didn't campaign against it. Okay, fine. So fast forward, Monty McNaughton ran for leader in 2015, endorsed by something called Parents as First Educators, PAFE, against the sex ed curriculum. Mm-hmm. He quits. He endorses Patrick Brown. Patrick Brown's leader. Thank you, PAFE. You delivered Patrick Brown for us. When Patrick Brown went down, Tanya Granick-Allen ran for leader, cut a deal with Doug Ford. Nice little secret deal. Delivered Doug Ford the leadership. They couldn't do it on their own, though. They needed the Axe the Carbon Tax narrative, so they pretended to copy that for a bit. And then PAFE got us, Parents as First Educators got us Doug Ford. They don't really talk about Doug Ford a lot, though. In the last year, they don't really say we need to get rid of Doug Ford. There's a problem with the Ontario PC party. They don't oppose the Ontario PC party. When I ran for president in 2018, PAFE told their delegates, their people that follow them on the email, to go to that convention, right? Hundreds of dollars to pay to go to a PC convention. PAFE was encouraging people to go. They had a deal in place with Ford staff, Tanya Granick-Allen and PAFE, to support or at least not oppose Brian Patterson running for president. And I was running for president. So PAFE goes and endorses a guy running on Patterson's slate, Tim Iqbal, who's on the PC executive. And they couldn't stop me, so they rigged the vote. And PAFE and Tanya Granick-Allen never told their supporters that that vote was rigged. It's been 3 years since that convention, and they never told anyone that that vote was rigged after they told their people to go spend hundreds of dollars. We had a lot of supporters that went to that convention and realized something was rotten then. And they were wondering why an organization like PAFE wouldn't tell me that this was rigged. Now, there are good organizations like Campaign Life Coalition who call it out. They make mistakes. We all make mistakes, who we endorse and this and that. But when there's voter fraud, you blow the whistle. And then to Wyatt's point, PAFE went and recruited Derek Sloan to run, or at least they backed him in that leadership race federally. The co-founder of PAFE, I thought, was someone that wanted to help out on my campaign, and a friend was on my leadership campaign and set me up to send the email out that got me disqualified that day. And so I got kicked out of the race, went and sued. And then they got this Derek Sloan guy to just basically try to copy what Jim was saying in the leadership and make it sound like he was on par with Jim. And him and Aaron O'Toole and PAFE spent more time criticizing Leslyn Lewis in that race than they criticized Aaron O'Toole. So PAFE and Derek Sloan didn't criticize Aaron O'Toole in that race. But boy, they were picking on Leslyn Lewis. So Aaron gets 25% of the vote from Derek, and they stop Leslyn Lewis and Jim Karahalios from becoming leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. And of course, PAIF doesn't say anything. Tanya Granick-Allen congratulates Aaron O'Toole, has him on the show that she has over there with Tony Clement, who's really tight with the PC brass. And these are the kind of games that are being played to sabotage Conservative efforts, right? And now they've got this guy, Derek Sloan, coming back again to distract from the New Blue Party. And they won't talk about Belinda getting kicked out. They won't talk about Belinda not being able to speak at Queen's Park on Saturday. They won't talk about the New Blue Party. And that's because they don't want to replace the Ontario PC Party. Because the PC operatives have a tight relationship with some of these groups that spend a lot of time trying to rile up pro-lifers and Christian voters. And it's a shame. It's a shame because they're ripping them off with no hope of ever winning. And they don't like what the New Blue Party is doing. It's because we want to replace the Ontario PC Party, and we don't make any bones about it. No apologies about it. And so what I think is going to happen, and then you're going to jump in wide, is what I think is going to happen. Randy's party's falling apart, but I think the lobbyists in the back of the PC Party, when they see us rolling out candidates soon, and they see we're going to have a nomination process, they're going to put a lot of pressure on Randy and on Max and on other people. Maybe Max has smartened up and he's going to stay out of it, focus on federal politics. But they're going to put a lot of pressure on Randy and Roman. And, you know, maybe we'll even see the great Tanya Granick-Allen come back to endorse and come together like some kind of an Ontario party or something. That's what we're going to see. And it's going to be all hands on deck to stop New Blue. That's what's going to happen. And they're going to cut all kinds of deals in the back. And there's going to be all kinds of secret deals that we don't know about. And a lot of pressure applied and yelling and screaming and maybe even some money that we'll never see to coalesce around and make it look like the New Blue is not a legit option. And the media, who are cozy with the lobbyists behind the PC Party, are going to report it. Like they've been reporting, there's 3 parties in Ontario. There's 3 parties in Ontario. No, there aren't. There's actually, you know what? There's 2. There's a PC Party on the right, and then there's New Blue. And then the other one that's closest to us in infrastructure is the Libertarian Party. But when you ask the media, apparently, like the Ontario Last Party and whatever Derek's up to these days has more infrastructure than the Libertarian Party. No, they don't. Libertarian Party's actually got more riding associations and members and donors than those guys do. At least they got a registered party. So it's going to be the New Blue Party on June 2nd. It's just going to be a bumpy ride until then, guys. It's going to be bumpy.
So I was just going to play devil's advocate here for just a second, because I know there would be some people out there who are saying, well, all these people offered to unify the Ontario Conservative movements. Derek Sloan, Randy Hillier, they want to unify things. Maxime Bernier is just trying to bring the right together in Ontario. So that's the first point. I think you're going to see a lot of people say, like, respond to you on social media saying, well, no, Jim's a liar. He's the one not unifying. Look at him ripping these people down. Although I think it's a little bit of I think it's a little bit of, you'll say things publicly, they'll only jab people behind the scenes and then just pretend like they don't know what's going on in public.
Never a public debate. Right?
And then the second one I know is going to happen is that people are going to say, well, Tanya Granick-Allen, she was kicked out of her nomination race, or she was removed as the candidate in her riding in the last Ontario election. Why would she ever do anything for the PC Party? She's a fighter. She's fighting for us.
She disappeared. I thought she retired from politics. She got a TV show with Tony Clement over there that no one watches. And I thought she was done, but then she reappeared at the leadership to say congratulations to Aaron O'Toole when he supposedly won a legit race, which was not legit because he could only win because he got me kicked out of the race twice. And now I know that they're quietly behind whatever this Derek Sloan operation is. So yeah, these characters like Derek Sloan and Randy Hillier, they might not like Doug Ford, right?
And Jim, let's think logically. How could Tanya Granick-Allen say congratulations to Aaron O'Toole when she's supposed to be super Christian, super pro-life?
I don't know.
Right? And here you have Aaron O'Toole, who is unabashedly progressive, LGBTQ plus.
He voted for the NDP's version of Bill C-16 in 2015. Even Michelle Rempel couldn't bring herself to vote for something that's stupid.
Like, he's to the left of Michelle Rempel, and that's like saying something. I mean, he's basically, come on, like, let's get real.
Yeah, and her and Derek retweeting Roman Baber's stuff. And Roman is admittedly like a guy that's on the left side of the spectrum, right? Like, he's red Tory, right? And he's criticizing lockdowns from the left side, saying we should bring in more international professionals in healthcare, spend more money on healthcare. There's nothing wrong with it. He's giving his opinion, right? But he doesn't, they're repeating his narrative. No promotion, though, of New Blue. No discussion as to Belinda getting kicked out, banned from the legislature, because you could be against Doug Ford, but still desperately want to be on good terms with the establishment of the Ontario PC party. And it's been around for a long time. It's got a lot of tentacles. And when a guy like Jim stands up and Belinda stand up, and we've got riding associations and hundreds of people running who want to replace the Ontario PC party because there is no right of center option, then the people that are tied into segments of the establishment are not going to like us. So it's not a right-left thing, guys. This is a top and a grassroots thing versus the guys at the top. Right. And the people at the top have been friends with each other for 30 years, and they protect each other. And they might have internal party wars and stuff like that, but they'd never say, we want to replace the PC party. They'd never say that convention was rigged. They'd never say that nomination was rigged. They'd never say, oh, no, kicking Jim Karahalios out of the leadership twice was undemocratic and ripped off thousands of Conservative Party donors across Canada.
Yeah, they may not say it, but the OPP may say it.
Actually, to be fair, behind the scenes, some of them will tell me they've read your lawsuit and they think that you're correct, but then they won't say anything about it.
They won't publicly campaign on it. So Randy, Derek, Roman never said anything about a rigged convention, never said anything about rigged nominations in the PC party. They're not even against the taxpayer subsidy that Doug Ford put in for political parties it's going to be one of our key platform commitments, because there's going to be 5 themes. And one of the themes is going to be cleaning up politics in Ontario. And the first item on that is scrapping the per vote taxpayer subsidy. The one that the PCs get, $5.9 million of taxpayer money every year. The NDP get, the Liberals get, the Greens get, that Randy Hillier gets, that Roman Baber gets, that the New Blue does not get. That's the way
that's something that Greg Staley made the point about in his article over at Diverge Media, where he was essentially, to a certain extent, fact-checking me on his own website, fact-checking the article on Randy Hillier being sort of controlled opposition. And he even said that it doesn't make any sense when Randy Hillier is going around pretending like he won a constitutional challenge to make sure that he got some sort of per vote taxpayer subsidy. I'm not sure where in the Ontario Constitution anyone deserves a taxpayer subsidy, especially all of the independent MPPs and establishment MPPs, but not the New Blue MPP, Belinda Karahalios.
Yeah, and Greg does great work at Diverge Media, and you, Wyatt, and him are writing about stuff that no one else wants to write about in the establishment media, because they're all getting favors from the federal Trudeau government and the Ford PC government.
Right.
We're going to fight it. We're going to fight on some of that, the favors that are happening, and Ford paving the way. But that's going to be our first commitment of one of 5 themes. And that one theme is cleaning up party politics. And we're going to get rid of the per vote subsidy in Ontario politics. Taxpayer money, not to expand monoclonal antibody treatment across Ontario, make it widely available. Not for that, but millions for political parties, Richard. Think of how backwards these sickos are, right?
Well, you have the fox. Listen, our political system is basically the fox guarding the hen house. So that's essentially what you have. So they're voting in these things where they're eating at the trough, while the rest of Ontarians are suffering with higher expenses, high inflation, high gas prices, food shelves that are empty, and these guys are eating steak at the Albany Club. That's the reality.
They're complaining that they all don't equally get to rip off the taxpayer.
Right. And the fight is over who can rip off the taxpayer the most. Both the fight between the PCs, the Liberals, and the NDP, and also within the parties. They have these internal party races, and they're all at the trough. It's really funny. How did Randy set up this advocacy group, and he had employees that were getting paid to do no more lockdown stuff all over Ontario? I could tell you guys, really hard to raise money in politics in Ontario. And, we've been at it at six years, and we've developed a following. We're grateful for them, but it's really hard. You can't just snap your finger, have an advocacy group, people start sending you money. I don't know how Derek Sloan, 4 weeks after he started saying, 4 weeks after he announced he was in charge of some party, mail started landing, color brochures to what looks like tens of thousands of people on the Conservative Party leadership list federally, right? That's not even enough time to raise the money. Like when you get it done and you send it to the print house, it takes 2 weeks to print and put in the mail and 3 days to get it through the mail. So he had the money line up before he sent his first email blast, right? We didn't do our first mailing in the New Blue for months after we registered and were able to raise money, right? So where did he have the money lined up that he knew he was going to afford tens of thousands of dollars of color brochures with his picture on it 5 times saying, give me money because I'm doing this Ontario party thing, even though I can't even register a federal party after a year of trying. So there's a lot of backroom things going on, but we're going to get rid of that taxpayer subsidy and we're going to make it harder for lobbyists to meddle in party politics, if not outright ban it. Because right now the Ontario law is not like the federal law. Prime Minister Harper put in a law federally that put a lot of distance between lobbyists and federal political parties. You remember that? The Accountability Act? Yeah. That was when we first got involved. In Ontario, the law is not like that. So you can have a guy like Corey Tenike who owns a lobbying firm, but quote unquote takes a leave of absence and manages the campaign for Doug Ford. And the law has no teeth. So the Integrity Commissioner can't do anything about it. And you can have a guy like Nick Kouvalis who likes to attack me on Twitter. And he can do polling for the Ontario PC party and at the same time lobby the caucus members that he's polling. So he's polling for them and giving them advice on the numbers, and they don't see how he's doing the polls. And then he's also lobbying for them on behalf of his clients. So that has to be cleaned up. We got to tighten up, if not outright ban it, the involvement of lobbyists inside political parties. And not to mention the PC executive that got in place with Brian Patterson rigging that convention. I think 2/3 of it were lobbyists, right? If not half, I don't know. Maybe some of them have quit. I haven't checked because there is no party executive on the PC party anymore. They don't even have elections, and Doug Ford selects all the candidates. But we got to clean it up. So there you go. One of the 5 themes, you already know what we're going to do on lockdowns. We're going to put in legislation and fines to ban the use of vaccine passports, COVID vaccine passports and masks.
Good for you.
Not only with public employers, but we got to figure out a way to stop private employers from firing people and people losing their jobs over these mandates. We're going to expand early treatment on COVID across the province. So I don't want to hear any more phone calls, people crying, desperate, why their mom or why their dad weren't able to get monoclonal antibody treatment because they didn't know about it, because they weren't able to Google it and drive down to Hamilton and get it early. Like, I can't, it just breaks my heart. Like, it's terrible. I can't explain to you how difficult it is. And I've been texting the family the last week to see how they're doing. So that's obvious what we're going to do on the lockdown mandate related things. And because we've been talking about it, but on cleaning up party politics, we're going to get rid of the taxpayer subsidy. We're going to put the screws to the lobbyists. We're going to, if we could ban it, I would love to ban it. So you pick, you want to be a political organizer and get involved, or you could be a lobbyist. But if you're a lobbyist, you're not showing up to a nomination. You're not running a campaign. You're not a campaign manager. You're not doing any of that stuff. And you're not going from, working for the government to lobbying them a week later.
Right.
That stuff's got to get all cleaned up. It's got to have teeth on the law. There's got to be severe punishment if they're doing it behind the scenes and underground. And it's got to be like really cleaned up. And we've got to do something about this relationship between these party operatives and the media, because it is just crazy. The stuff the media is putting out there, the lies they put out on me. I mean, Brian Lilly of The Sun and Martin Redge-Cohn of The Star. My goodness, the stuff these guys make up. I couldn't even make it up if I tried. Like, the lies that just come out of their mouths is unbelievable.
How many people would actually keep their how many people would keep their jobs if they were literally reporting on Doug Ford in the way that Brian Lilly does while literally living with his press secretary? I'm pretty sure in any other media industry on this planet, you would have been like kicked out of your job. But I guess you can never fail too hard in Canadian media to not get promoted or at least stay where you are.
Well, they certainly know who their masters are, and government's funding these mainstream media operations because most of the stuff they write's boring, so no one's reading them. And
Right.
they blame, it's the internet, and it's not because what you write is terrible. What you write,
my budget's $5 and a ham sandwich, and I can get people to I get thousands of people to read stories. I've gotten like stories with 100,000 views on them, but if you go to certain other websites and you run them through share counters on Facebook, they no one gives a crap.
You and Greg are doing a great job at Diverge Media, writing stuff the mainstream media won't write. So they'll write stuff about extreme stuff being said on COVID, but they won't talk about maybe it's if Randy Hillier puts out misinformation or something that's not true, maybe it's like the government that's got to deal with that guy pushing him to put misinformation out. Why won't the media write on that? Why won't they investigate that? Why won't they look into that? And so we've got to do it from the ground up, New Blue, and it's not going to be an insurmountable challenge. I was with a supporter, and the supporter. The thing that people forget is that in the story of David Goliath, David wins.
Mm-hmm.
David wins. So we're all David, and we've got to start over with a new party because the establishment parties have been hijacked. Mm-hmm. And it might look like it's a tough thing, but we just got to be at it. We got to continue to fight. They've discounted and they've dismissed us before and said the Karahalios team can't win this, can't win that. But they're obviously putting a lot of effort to stop us, starting with this rally at Queen's Park tomorrow, that they won't let Belinda Karahalios speak at, the only PC MPP to vote against Doug Ford's lockdown bill, the only MPP formerly of the PCs to lead the charge against Bill 12, mandatory vaccinations. But they're having it right on the steps of Queen's Park, and they won't invite the first original MPP to stand up against Ford's lockdown to speak. Like, how ridiculous is that? So I'm flattered. They're obviously threatened, Richard, because if they weren't threatened, Wyatt, don't you agree? If they weren't threatened, they'd be like, here, go up there, take 20 minutes, take all the time.
Well,
of course.
If anything,
or if they were genuine. If they were genuine, they would bring you up on the stage. They'd bring Belinda up on the stage.
Well, that goes without saying.
And people will probably, again, on social media, be trying to bombard your profile. Like, you're irrelevant. Of course you didn't get invited. When, again, the New Blue Party, as we've been talking about, is the only one that has a substantial amount of EDAs. Everyone else just sort of has Twitter profiles, and that's kind of it. Where I'm not sure why they're so special that they're coming up on stage to talk to people about all the stuff that they're not going to be able to actually accomplish during an election. So yeah, like would you encourage people not to show up then if they hear about the rally, if it's going to be this in-groupish?
So look, the government has a lot of people out there whispering in people's ears bad things about me, and there's a whisper campaign that's been going on since 2018 when I ran for PC president. Another heartbreaking story. You guys know that Liberty Coalition?
Mm-hmm.
You guys heard of that thing?
Yes.
So it was started by a group of pastors. These pastors reached out to my wife. I think Mike Thiessen's the campaign manager of the Lockdown Caucus. It's his name. I didn't know who this guy was. Reached out to my wife. We went and had they had a meeting with Belinda when she was still a PC MPP. Okay. And they were begging for an MPP because no politician would talk to them. Not Derek Sloan, not Randy Hillier, not Max Bernier. No one wanted to talk to them. But Belinda went on her off day, not at Queen's Park, all the way to southwestern Ontario from Cambridge, further southwest, over an hour drive, and met with them. And they desperately needed a politician to stand up and say something against the lockdowns. Okay? This was in April or May of 2020. This is important because I want you to see and hear what's going on and how tough it is in politics when you're fighting the establishment. And so I think it was June 2020, Belinda stood up and voted against the lockdown bill, and she's been in Queen's Park defending churches that are getting locked down. And these pastors had us to go speak to their group later in the winter when I was getting diagnosed a couple weeks later with a tumor in my leg, and I was limping, and I was really lucky my femur didn't snap at that dinner. And we told them about the New Blue Party because they encouraged my wife that we need a new party. And we formed up a new party, and the leaders of this group were lining up to talk to us. This is great. This is a new party. This is what we need because we got no options come in 2022. And then they went and got cozy with Randy Hillier because I got sick and we were out of the action for a bit, so to speak, right? Belinda had her hands full, and they went and got cozy with Randy Hillier. But then when I got better, they came back. They came back and they wanted a meeting. And we had a meeting and we laid them all the inside story as to what's going on with the New Blue Party. We laid it all out. Here's the Constitution. It hasn't been published. We got members. We got donors. And they said, we're right with you. Will you meet with Randy? Will you meet with this guy? Will you meet with the other guy? I'll meet with anyone you want. I don't think they're coming on side, but if you guys think you have the magic touch, the Midas touch, whatever you want to call it, the Christian pastor touch, I'll meet with them. The meeting never happened. We had an option for one meeting. I was the only one that wanted to go. I was told Derek wanted to go, but the other guys didn't want to go. And I even offered leadership races, guys. I said, let's, if they have a problem with me, my style being leader, let's have a leadership race. They said, we'll get back to you, but we support the New Blue. They immediately went off first to have Randy Hillier pretend he was going to start a party. And then when that fell apart, they went off to cut a deal to have Derek Sloan pretend to start a party. And they didn't even have the courtesy, these guys, to call my wife and say, thank you for what you've done, but we're going to try some other yo-yo idea. So, in their defense, fools, they don't know what they're doing because they have PC operatives in the back from the news forum and from other places whispering in their ears, Jim's a bad guy, Jim's this, Jim's that, because Jim speaks the truth. And so we have pastors that want to be part of the establishment, and they run around telling people politicians need to speak the truth, politicians need to stand up. And when a couple of people like me and Belinda speak the truth and stand up, they don't like it because it ruffles the wrong feathers, and they don't act like pastors and they don't act like Christians because they used my wife to tell her to do the right thing. And then they ditched her and they ditched me, and they didn't even have the courtesy to pick up the phone and say, we've been scheming with Randy Hillier and we've been scheming with Derek Sloan. And the poor fools don't even know they're being manipulated by PC operatives in the back. They have no idea because they're new to this game, they're rookies, and they don't want to listen. Too proud to listen to the experiences that we've had of how these guys, the PC operatives, are screwing Ontario voters and taxpayers.
Because what I had heard from talking to people aware of what the pastors were, I guess, thinking is that the excuse I heard for why, well, Jim's toxic, we can't work with Jim, was this kind of farcical story, which never really seemed to have many details, where Jim Karahalios ripped the microphone out of Belinda Karahalios' hand. He must be a bad husband or something. And I'm thinking, like, pastors are saying this. I'm like, I thought, Christian men, especially pastors, would have, a little bit of more discernment for how they would approach a situation like that, rather than seeing something that they thought happened, or even being told that had happened, and then they immediately pass judgment and say, well, Jim Karahalios is clearly a villain. We can't have him leading a party. He might rip the microphone out of so many people's hands that the party will never win. But it didn't make any sense to me.
I took the mic away from my wife's hand at our first public appearance since I recovered from cancer to praise my wife. That's what I did. I took the mic away to praise her because she's not very good at praising herself, and I'm not very good at praising myself. And I took it away to remind everyone in the audience, because she wasn't going to say it, that she was the only current or former PC MPP to vote against that lockdown bill. And a couple of these pastors say it was a terrible thing that I did, praising my wife. But they're very good at preaching their moral values on other people, not very good at living up to them or looking in the mirror. But I don't have any ill will towards them. They're going to come around. They're going to vote for the New Blue because it's going to be the only option. And their people that go to their congregation are going to vote New Blue, and taxpayers are going to vote for New Blue. Small business are going to vote for New Blue. And all this nonsense about who's this and who's that. If you actually care about what's going on in society and you care to oppose these schemers running the establishment parties, you're going to put away all this nonsense about this guy did that and this guy said this and I want to be the leader and I'm a fighter. You're going to put it away and you're going to come on side. Otherwise, you don't care. You're like Randy and you're like Derek. You don't actually care what happens to Ontario. You're just looking for the next thing to do because you got nothing else to do, and the PC operatives are trying to tell you to do it. So they got a choice to make. So we'll see what people's choices are. I know we're doing really well, and the PCs are panicking that Belinda's leading in Cambridge, and I put in my candidate application, and I'm telling the New Blue board I want to run in Kitchener-Conestoga. So you guys get to hear it first on the National Telegraph. The seat of the MPP is the former Premier Mike Harris's son. And guys, I'd rather run where I live. But where I live, there's a great MPP. Her name's Belinda Karahalios. And I can't run there. So people want the leader of a party to lead. And Doug Ford is going to have me running in Kitchener-Conestoga against the guy he handpicked to be the candidate there in the MPP, the former Premier Mike Harris, by Mike Harris. And I think that's the right riding for me. We're going to talk it over the board, and we'll see how it goes. But they're going to be up for a fight, and they're really worried. They're not happy with what we're doing.
Well, I think that's probably a great place to end off on that announcement. So we can look forward to hearing more news from the New Blue Party and seeing what you guys are doing, and especially if the New Blue Party starts showing up in more polls and seeing how much of an impact this has. Because I kind of want to get past the point as just a journalist of, well, which one of these alternative parties is the one that is making up the other category. I kind of want to just get to what I want to sort of live in reality rather than sort of being in this environment where I have to kind of pretend as if any of these places, any of these parties are sort of equivalent to one another. But it'll be great probably if we can get more of that solidified in a couple of months. And if you have any more last words, Jim or Richard?
There's only one party, Wyatt, so stop letting them fool you. There's a New Blue Party, and actually there's the Libertarian Party. They've been around for a long time. But we're a bit more conservative on issues than the Libertarians are. Like, we want to get rid of the drug injection site in Cambridge that got approved. And so that's the party that's got 114 riding associations and hundreds of people running and thousands of members and donors. And we're gearing up, and we're going as fast as we can for June 2nd, guys. And we're not going to stop after June 2nd, because June 3rd is going to be just as important as June 2nd. And we're going to keep going. And the best is yet to come, because we're going to replace the Ontario PC Party in Ontario as the right of center option.
Well, my last comment, I think I'm going to share this story with you. It just happened to me this week. I rarely answer phone calls at home where I don't recognize the phone number, but I was just tempted with all the duct cleaning calls and whatnot. I was going to answer this call, and it came from a 289 area code. So I said I was going to answer it this week. And the lady on the other line said, because I'm a member of the Provincial Conservative Party, the lady on the line said, you know, Mr. Rupp, thank you for being a supporter of the PC party. This is a very important election. Doug Ford needs your support, blah, 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 blah. So I answered her, and this is the second time that they did this to me, and I answered the same way. I said, look, if Doug Ford wants my support, you better open up the province of Ontario, get rid of the stupid masks, get rid of the QR codes. This is not communist China. Get rid of the vaccine passports. Learn from conservatives south of the border in Florida and Texas and Tennessee and Arizona. Open this province up totally and tell Doug Ford to stop being a liberal like Stephen Del Duca or Andrea Horwath, because he can't tell the difference among any of them. The lady was just flabbergasted, shocked, and she said, well, thank you for your previous support. Goodbye. And she hung up the phone.
Well, I think that's a great place to end off. And with that, well, we'll be here probably next week on the narrative for TNT, and just letting everyone know within about 30 minutes, I have another stream going on which is an independent media roundtable, talking to a lot of these small independent media organizations, seeing how other journalists got into doing what they do and how they deal with social media censorship. So see you next week, or see you in 30 minutes if you also want to watch that great stream. Thanks for coming on, Jim.
Thanks, guys.